My name is Ethan. I was 17 at the time, and I always loved history. When our school announced a field trip to an old abandoned gold mine near Leadville, Colorado, I was thrilled. It was early October, the air was crisp, and the golden leaves were falling all around. The mine had been closed for decades, and the school arranged a small group visit for history students. I remember that morning clearly. The school bus was quiet except for the occasional whisper about how haunted the place was. We arrived around 9 in the morning, and the sunlight made the mountain shadows stretch long across the old mining town. Rusted carts and broken equipment were scattered everywhere. Our guide, an older historian who had spent years studying Colorado's gold rush era, led us to the entrance. The mine looked dark, a black hole cut into the side of the mountain. The air was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of decay and rust. At first, it was fascinating. The walls were rough and carved by hand, and old tools lay in dust-covered corners. But as we went deeper, the air grew heavier. I noticed strange, almost imperceptible markings on the walls, symbols that looked like scratches, but were too deliberate to be random. My curiosity pulled me toward them, and I stayed slightly behind the group. As I examined the marks, I felt a sudden chill crawling up my spine. My breath began to cloud in the cold air, though the rest of the mine felt only slightly cooler than the outside. We reached a narrow tunnel, nearly pitch black even with our flashlights. My flashlight flickered and then went out. I remember the darkness pressing against me, suffocating yet silent. Something urged me to keep moving forward, and against my better judgment, I did. The ground became uneven, the smell of wet stone mixing with something metallic, like blood or rusted iron. Every step echoed oddly, as if the mine itself were watching. Shadows seemed to shift at the edges of my vision, shapes that were just out of reach, but unmistakably humanoid. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was another student, crouched near an old wooden support beam. But as I approached, I realized it wasn't human. The figure was thin, unnaturally elongated, with limbs that bent at strange angles. Its head was bowed, and its face, though partially hidden, seemed hollow, like a skull carved out of the darkness. I froze, unable to move, my flashlight trembling in my hands. The air around it shimmered slightly, cold waves pressing into my skin. I backed away slowly, trying to find the main tunnel, but the mine seemed to have changed. The tunnels I thought I had memorized twisted in ways that made no sense. My heart raced, and I realized I was completely alone. The distant sound of my classmates' voices was gone, replaced by a silence so heavy I could hear my own blood pulsing in my ears. Panic took over, and I ran blindly, tripping over stones and old wooden planks, desperately trying to find the entrance. When I finally emerged, sunlight blinding me, I realized I was at a completely different opening. The group and the guide were nowhere in sight. Shaking, I ran toward the main path, and after what felt like hours, I saw the bus parked near the old town ruins. Everyone looked worried, asking where I had been, but the mine itself seemed untouched, silent, like it had swallowed part of me and then returned me unharmed. I never told anyone about the figure. I don't know what it was, and I haven't returned to that mountain since. But I still remember the chill, the hollow face, and the way the shadows seemed alive. I was 15 at the time of this field trip. My school organized a nature trip to the dense forests near the Oregon coast during late spring. I had always loved hiking, and the idea of walking through untouched forest land sounded like a dream. The forest we were visiting was known for its mossy, twisting trees and the labyrinth of hidden trails that local guides sometimes avoided because people frequently got lost there. We arrived early in the morning, the fog rolling in from the coast, making the trees look like dark silhouettes. The air was heavy with damp earth and salt from the ocean. Our group followed a narrow trail, our boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. I remember the guide explaining that the forest had old logging sites from the 1800s, and some areas had never been touched since. I found the history fascinating, especially the stories of lost hikers, but I didn't believe them until that day. Around mid-morning, I strayed from the main trail to get a closer look at a waterfall cascading over moss-covered rocks. The mist made the path slippery, and in a split second, I slipped, falling down a small incline. I landed near a thicket of dense ferns, hidden from the main trail. When I looked up, I realized I could no longer see anyone from our group. The forest seemed impossibly dense, trees closing in like walls. I tried retracing my steps, but every turn looked the same. The sunlight filtering through the fog created eerie patterns, and the air felt alive, pressing against me. I walked for what felt like hours, each path looping back to the same spot. Strange things began to happen. I saw glimpses of figures just behind the trees, fleeting shadows that vanished when I blinked. The sound of leaves rustling above me was constant, though no wind blew. My sense of direction collapsed entirely. By late afternoon, panic set in. My phone had no signal, and the forest seemed infinite. I stumbled upon an old stone structure, half hidden by moss and ivy. Its purpose was unclear, but I felt drawn toward it. The doorway was black, and I sensed someone, or something, watching from inside. I wanted to leave, but my feet moved of their own accord, and I entered. The air inside was damp, cold, and smelled faintly of smoke. The walls were carved with strange symbols, unfamiliar shapes that seemed to shimmer as I walked past. Suddenly, I realized I had lost all sense of time. The forest outside had grown darker, though it should have still been light. My panic escalated as I turned to leave, only to find the doorway blocked by something solid. The shadows inside the structure seemed to pulse alive. My instinct screamed at me to run, and I forced myself through a narrow gap, emerging back into the forest. I ran blindly until I finally found the main trail, where the guide and my classmates were searching for me. They said I had been missing for nearly 3 hours. I couldn't explain it. The forest felt different, as if it had shifted while I was inside, and the stone structure had vanished. Even now, years later, I avoid that area. The forest, the mist, and the strange symbols are burned into my memory. I cannot forget the feeling of being watched, trapped in a place that had no end. My name is Marcus, and I was 16 when this happened. Our history class went on a field trip to an old school building outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. The building had been abandoned since the 1970s and was rumored to be haunted. I was skeptical, but the opportunity to explore a real piece of local history was too exciting to pass up. It was a hot September morning, the sun already blazing down on the dusty desert terrain. The school was isolated, surrounded by cacti and dry, cracked earth. Its windows were shattered, and the paint on the walls peeled like dead skin. Inside, the air was thick with dust and a faint smell of mildew. I wandered ahead of the group, fascinated by the old classrooms, chalkboards still covered in faded writing, and lockers rusting away. The building was eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet. As I explored the second floor, I noticed that some classrooms seemed unusually intact, almost preserved. On one desk, an old notebook lay open as if someone had been studying the day the school closed. The pages were yellowed, but the handwriting was neat. I bent down to examine it and noticed that all the entries were dated the same year the school closed, but the last entry was strange. There was a series of symbols I did not recognize, and beneath them, A single sentence. They are still here. A sudden sense of dread washed over me. I looked around, and shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally across the floor. The building felt alive, every corner harboring some unseen presence. I hurried down the hallway, trying to reach the main staircase, but the building seemed to twist, hallways extending farther than they should. Each turn brought me back to the same spot. The exit I had seen moments ago was now gone. I stumbled into a large auditorium. Dust hung thick in the air, and the stage was empty except for a single chair facing the back wall. I felt drawn to it and approached, my heart pounding. When I looked at the chair, I saw it rocking slightly, though no breeze blew. Panic surged, and I ran toward what I thought was the exit. The building seemed endless. I was trapped in a maze of corridors that had no pattern, no logic. Hours seemed to pass, though it was likely only minutes. Eventually, I found a broken window and climbed through it, scraping my arms on the rusted metal frame. I landed outside in the bright desert sun, panting, disoriented, and shaken. My classmates had assumed I had lagged behind and had started searching frantically. They were relieved to see me, but the experience changed me. I still think about the school, the symbols, and the sensation of being watched. The place was alive in a way I cannot explain, and I have never returned.